The universe had seen many impossible things. It had watched stars collapse into themselves, swallowing light and time in equal measure. It had witnessed civilizations rise across 10,000 worlds, build monuments that scraped the heavens, and burn themselves to ash in the same breath. It had endured the ancients. Being so evolved, they shed their physical forms, like old skin, and ascended into pure energy, leaving behind only their machines and their mysteries. The universe, in its incomprehensible age, was not easily surprised. But even the universe had never felt anything quite like this. Deep in an uncharted galaxy, hundreds of millions of light years from Earth, the ancient vessel Destiny drifted through the void on its eternal, pre-programmed course. The ship was a cathedral of forgotten engineering, corridors of honeygold metal that hummed with quiet power, systems so advanced that humanity's brightest minds had spent months aboard her and still understood perhaps 5% of what she could do. She was older than most civilizations. She had been sailing alone for 50 million years, waiting for a crew worthy of her purpose. The crew she had were doing their best. In the gate room, Eli Wallace was elbow deep in a diagnostic panel, muttering calculations under his breath while 3 different ancient script readouts scrolled past faster than he could process them. Colonel Everett Young stood at the observation window, arms crossed, watching the starfield, with the quiet exhaustion of a man who had long since stopped being surprised by catastrophe, and simply waited for the next one. Dr. Nicholas Rush sat at his console, with the focused intensity of someone who had found religion, not in any god, but in the ship herself, in the secrets buried in her deepest memory banks. It was Rush who noticed it first, not because he was looking for it. He never was. With the most important discoveries, the ancient database had flagged an anomaly in one of Destiny's lower research decks, a chamber they hadn't fully catalogued, sealed behind 3 layers of security protocols that had resisted every attempt at access. Rush had assigned it low priority. There were always sealed chambers. There were always protocols. The ship hoarded her secrets like a miser hoards gold. But this anomaly was different. The chamber had activated. Colonel. Rush's voice carried across the gate room with unusual urgency. Young turned. You need to see this. The readings on Rush's screen were unlike anything in their reference database. The sealed chamber, designation research node, Omega 7 in Destiny's filing system. A label so generic it suggested deliberate obfuscation, was generating an energy field that the ship sensors couldn't categorize. Not neutrinos, not electromagnetic radiation, not any quantum signature they had encountered from GoULD, Wraith, or Nakari technology. The closest analog in Destiny's own sensor vocabulary was the energy signature associated with ancient ascension, that moment when a being shed physicality and became something beyond measurement. But it wasn't ascension energy either. It was denser, more vital, more alive. What is that? Young asked, leaning over Rush's shoulder. I have absolutely no idea, Rush said, which from Nicholas Rush meant the situation was genuinely unprecedented. But Destiny does. She activated the chamber herself, autonomously. She's been waiting for this specific signature. Eli looked up from his panel. Waiting? For how long? Rush pulled up the chambers. Creation timestamp. From the ship's deepest archive logs. He stared at it for 3 full seconds before he spoke. 50 million years. The lights flickered. Every system on Destiny surged simultaneously. Not a malfunction, but something more like a held breath finally released. The hum that perpetually ran beneath the ship's floors. So constant the crew had stopped hearing it weeks ago. Rose in pitch until it was almost musical. Then the gate room's primary screen flooded with ancient script that scrolled too fast for even Rush to parse. And from 3 decks below came a sound that had no business existing in the vacuum-adjacent silence of deep space. A sound like the universe tearing at its seams. Then, too, the first impact shook Destiny hard enough to send Eli stumbling into his console. The second came half a second later, slightly further aft, and the ship's structural integrity alarms began their flat, insistent wailing. Young had his radio to his mouth before the echoes faded, calling for security teams and damage control with the calm efficiency of a man who had been through too much to panic. But the damage reports that came back made no sense. No breach, no explosion, no projectile impact. 2 humanoid life signs had appeared on deck. From nowhere. From nothing. They found them in the corridor outside. Research node Omega-7, the chamber's outer doors, blown clean off their ancient hinges, the air around them shimmering with residual energy that made Destiny sensors sing with confused data. 2 men, both shorter than expected given the force of their arrival, both dressed in training clothes that looked wildly out of place against 50-million-year-old ancient metal, both radiating an energy signature that made Rush's handheld scanner produce readings it wasn't designed to display. The first one, black-haired, with a scar beneath his eye and an expression of immediate, unguarded curiosity, was already on his feet, turning slowly, taking in the ancient corridor, with the wide-eyed wonder of a child who had just discovered something magnificent. "Whoa," Goku said softly, pressing one hand against the humming gold wall. "This ship is old. Like, really, really old. I can feel it." The second one rose from one knee with the deliberate, controlled motion of someone who refused to let any environment make him appear vulnerable. His hair rose in a sharp widow's peak, and his dark eyes moved across the corridor, the damaged door, the distant sound of running boots, and the glowing energy residue with the calculating precision of a tactician assessing a battlefield. Vegeta said nothing for a long moment. Then, "We were pulled here." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation directed at the universe itself, delivered in the tone of a man already deciding how to make the universe answer for its presumption. The security team rounded the corner. 8 armed personnel, weapons raised, shouting instructions in a language neither Saiyans recognized. Goku raised both hands immediately, still smiling, still curious, entirely unafraid. He'd been pointed at by weapons before. The energy coming off these people was tense but not malicious. They were scared, which was reasonable, and trying to contain something they didn't understand, which was also reasonable. He decided he liked them already. Vegeta crossed his arms and stared at the weapons the way a lion stares at a house cat. "Kakarot," he said, with dangerous quiet. "If one of them fires that at me, I will not be responsible for what happens to this ship. Let's just talk to them, Vegeta. I don't take orders from you." "I'm not giving an order," Goku said, still cheerful. "I'm just saying, talking's usually faster." Vegeta's expression suggested he found this deeply, personally offensive. But he didn't move. If you want to see more characters crash into impossible universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see make the jump in the comments below. The interrogation room aboard Destiny had been repurposed from something the ancients had built for purposes nobody had yet determined. The walls curved slightly inward at the top. The lighting came from no visible source, and the table in the center was a single piece of seamless metal that had never once been scratched despite 50 million years of existence. It was, objectively, one of the most remarkable rooms in the known universe. Goku thought it was pretty neat. He sat across from Colonel Young, Dr. Rush, and Eli with his hands flat on the table and the expression of someone genuinely trying to be helpful, which was both reassuring and slightly unnerving given that their preliminary scans had determined he could probably punch through Destiny's hull if the mood struck him. The energy readings coming off him were still confounding every instrument. They pointed in his direction. The closest analog in Rush's considerable scientific vocabulary was contained star, something burning at extraordinary temperatures held in perfect, disciplined equilibrium by nothing more than the will of the person generating it. "So," Eli said, stylus hovering over his tablet, "you're from a completely different universe." "I think so," Goku said, nodding. It didn't feel like instant transmission. Instant transmission I control. This was more like, he made a pulling gesture with both hands. Like something grabbed us and moved us. I've never felt anything do that before. And instant transmission is. I lock onto a KI signature and teleport to it. Works anywhere. Well. He paused. Anywhere in my universe. I'm not sure if it works here yet. Haven't tried. Young and Rush exchanged a look. The implications of a being who could teleport to any location by sensing energy were significant enough to generate an entire separate conversation, which they were both silently agreeing to table for later. Let's talk about your companion, Young said, keeping his voice even. Goku's expression shifted, not to worry exactly, but to something more careful. Vegeta. He refused to come. Yeah. He threatened Lieutenant Greer, with what our translator is still trying to categorize, but which Greer described as a small blue explosion that appeared in his hand from nowhere. That'd be his KI. He wasn't going to actually fire it. A pause. Probably. Probably, Young repeated. Vegeta doesn't like being told what to do, or being confined, or being treated like he doesn't know things, or Goku seemed to realize the list had significant length and summarized. He's complicated, but is not going to hurt anyone unless he decides they deserve it. And what makes someone deserve it, in Vegeta's judgment? Goku thought about this with genuine seriousness, threatening his pride, wasting his time, treating him like he's less than what he is. Another pause. He's a prince, of his people. The last one. That matters a lot to him. Rush leaned forward. And what are his people? Saiyans. Warrior race. We were both born on a planet called Vegeta. Goku smiled. Well, I was born there. I was sent away when I was a baby. I grew up on Earth. Vegeta actually remembers it. What it was like before. The smile faded slightly. Something complicated moving behind his eyes. Before it was destroyed. The room absorbed that quietly. Rush was already thinking 17 steps ahead. The way Rush always did, assembling fragments into a structure. A warrior race. A destroyed homeworld. 2 survivors with energy outputs that dwarfed anything in the Stargate database. And an ancient device that had been dormant for 50 million years. Specifically calibrated to detect and retrieve them. The ancients hadn't built that chamber by accident. Nothing they built was ever by accident. Vegeta found the sealed sectors on his own within 4 hours, which was either a testament to his intelligence or an indictment of Destiny's security protocols. Probably both. He had walked away from the security team with the calm confidence of someone who has assessed a threat and found it beneath response. They had followed him for 2 corridors before he turned, looked at the team leader, a broad-shouldered man named Greer, whose courage was evident, and whose energy signature was completely and utterly ordinary, and said, with perfect flatness, "You cannot stop me. You know you cannot stop me. We are wasting each other's time." Greer had held his ground, because Greer was built from the kind of material that holds its ground even when the rational mind is screaming at it to reconsider. Vegeta had actually respected that. In the private ledger he kept of things that earned acknowledgement. He hadn't said so. He had simply turned and walked in the opposite direction. And after a brief, charged standoff, the security team had followed at a distance rather than attempt physical restraint, which suited Vegeta perfectly. He wasn't interested in these humans. He wasn't interested in their politics or their fear or their questions. He was interested in the ship. Destiny was old. Vegeta had fought beings of incomprehensible power and age, gods. In the terminology his universe applied to such things. And he had learned to read the weight of history in objects the same way he read power levels in opponents. This ship had history the way a mountain has stone. Layer upon layer, compressed by time into something almost geological. And beneath the surface systems the humans were fumbling with. Beneath the interfaces they'd partially decoded. Beneath even the sealed chambers and the restricted corridors. Something deeper was running. Something that recognized him. He had felt it the moment they arrived. The ship's ambient hum had shifted, infinitesimally, in a register most beings wouldn't detect, when his Ki signature registered against its sensors. Not the alarm response of a system identifying a threat, something more like the adjustment of a scale. When a new weight is placed upon it. Recalibration. Destiny knew what he was. The question was why. He found the first sealed sector on Deck 7, a pressure door with ancient glyphs running its full height. Its locking mechanism so thoroughly encrypted that the humans probably hadn't even identified it as a door yet. Vegeta studied the glyphs for approximately 30 seconds. He couldn't read ancient script. He didn't need to. The energy pattern running through the lock was a puzzle of a type. He understood fundamentally. A gate that would open for sufficient power. Keyed not to a password but to a threshold. He pressed 2 fingers against the central glyph and released a controlled pulse of Ki. The door side opened like it had been waiting for him specifically. Beyond it was a laboratory, ancient in design, seamless in construction, and clearly dedicated to a research program that they, humans above, hadn't begun to suspect existed. The equipment was unfamiliar, but its purpose resonated in a way that made the hair on Vegeta's arms rise. These instruments were designed to measure, contain, and study energy of a type that matched his own. The ancients had known about Ki. Not just known about it. They had been researching it. On the central console. Still powered after 50 million years by Destiny's tireless energy supply. A holographic display flickered to life as Vegeta approached. Ancient script cascaded down one side. On the other, a visual representation that required no translation. A figure, humanoid, surrounded by a corona of energy that the display rendered in the exact golden hue of Super Saiyan transformation. Vegeta stared at it for a long time. So, he said softly, to the empty laboratory and there, 50 million-year-old ghost of whoever had built this room. You knew we were coming. His eyes moved to the deeper corridors beyond the lab. More sealed doors. More layers of encrypted ancient research, stacked like geological strata, each one representing decades of study into something the universe's most advanced civilization had found, significant enough to dedicate an entire research program to, and then seal away where no one would find it for 50 million years, unless they sent the ship out to find the right specimens. Vegeta's expression didn't change, but his Ki flared once, briefly, in something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite excitement and was entirely, characteristically Saiyan. Show me everything, he told the console. And Destiny, as if she had been waiting 50 million years for someone with the will to ask, began to comply. Rush hadn't slept in 31 hours, which for Nicholas Rush was practically a rest day. He sat alone in Destiny's nerve center, the room the crew had taken to calling the bridge, though the ancients had probably had a more elegant name for it, surrounded by holographic displays that cast blue light across his sharp features. The ship's database was vast beyond practical comprehension. Rush had developed a methodology for navigating it. Follow the threads that the ship herself seemed to want followed. The pathways that lit up with slightly more responsiveness than their neighbors. The files that loaded a fraction faster than the surrounding data. Destiny had opinions about what her crew should know. Rush had learned to listen. Tonight she was practically shouting. The arrival of the two Saiyans had unlocked something. In the database, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way that a key turning in a lock allows a door to swing open, under its own weight. Entire file trees that had been inaccessible for months were now readable. Research logs, expedition records, and at the center of it all, a project designation that Rush had to translate 3 times before he trusted his own reading. Project Animus. He pulled the primary file and began to read. The ancient script flowed across his screen, and as the meaning assembled itself in his mind, Rush felt the particular quality of silence that only descends when a person realizes the ground beneath their assumptions has fundamentally shifted. The ancients had not always ascended willingly. That was the first revelation. The prevailing understanding, built from everything recovered through the Stargate program, from the Asgard database, from Merlin's research, From 10 years of accumulated knowledge, was that ascension was the ancients' chosen evolution, the natural endpoint of their development, a transcendence they had worked toward deliberately and achieved through enlightenment. Project Animus suggested a more complicated history. Some ancients had ascended, many had not, and among those who had not, a faction had pursued an alternative path, a different form of transcendence that didn't require abandoning the physical form, didn't require the detachment and passivity that ascended existence demanded. They had the rise that the body itself could become the vessel for energy, beyond its original parameters, not a stepping stone to be discarded, but a foundation to be transformed. They had called this energy animus, the Latin root the translation matrix supplied, though the ancient concept was richer and stranger than any single human word could contain. Life force, vital energy, the power that animated matter from within rather than transcending it. They had searched for it across galaxies, and 50 million years ago, their instruments had detected two signatures, faint, distant, in a universe adjacent to their own, that matched their theoretical model precisely. Beings whose bodies had become vessels for energy that operated on principles the ancients had only theorized, living proof that their alternative path was not only possible but had been achieved independently by an entirely different evolutionary line. They had built research node Omega-7 to reach across the dimensional barrier and retrieve those signatures when they next appeared. They had then argued, extensively and bitterly, about what to do with that knowledge. Rush sat back in his chair and pressed his fingers together in the cathedral of his hands, staring at the data with the expression of a man whose worldview is being quietly, thoroughly dismantled and rebuilt. The ancients hadn't summoned Goku and Vegeta as specimens. They had summoned them as proof of concept, as the living demonstration of the path not taken, the answer to a question the ancient civilization had torn itself apart, debating and never resolved. The faction that built Project Animus had believed that physical transcendence was superior to ascension, that a being who could contain infinite energy within a mortal form was more complete than one who abandoned physicality entirely. They had died before they could prove it. Destiny had been carrying their unfinished argument across the universe for 50 million years, waiting for the evidence to arrive. Rush pulled up his radio. "Eli, I need you on the bridge. Now." "It's 4 in the morning, Rush." "I'm aware of the time, Eli." A pause. "Is this the ship is going to kill us all emergency or a Rush found something cool emergency?" Rush looked at the data filling his screens, at the ancient research logs, at the holographic model of Saiyan Ki that the Animus researchers had constructed from 50 million light-years away, using instruments so sensitive they could detect the echo of a power that hadn't yet been used. "Both," he said. "It's very much both." Goku found Rush and Eli on the bridge 2 hours later, drawn by the low hum of urgent conversation, and the particular quality of concentrated thought that he'd learned, over a lifetime of fighting beings far more strategic than himself, to recognize as significant. He wasn't much for political complexity or scientific theory, but he understood when something important was happening, and the energy coming off Rush had the tight, electric quality of a person holding something enormous. "You figured something out," Goku said, settling into a chair with the easy physicality of someone entirely comfortable in their own body, "about why we are here." Rush looked at him for a long moment. In the blue light of the bridge he looked older than his years, carved down to essentials by too much thinking and not enough rest. "The ancients knew about your kind," Rush said. "Not specifically you, not as individuals, but they knew that beings like you existed, beings who had achieved what they called animus, the capacity to contain and generate energy that transcends the body's original limitations without abandoning the physical form." He paused. They considered it the superior path to what they eventually chose, ascension. Goku was quiet for a moment. Superior how? An ascended being gains tremendous Power but loses. Connection to physical existence. To choice. To growth through conflict. Rush's eyes were intent. Your power, Ki, you called it, it grows through struggle. Through pushing limits. Through living. An ascended ancient becomes static. Perfect, perhaps, but unchanging. He leaned forward. The faction that built this research program believed that was a fatal flaw. That true evolution required remaining in the world, not transcending it. Goku absorbed this slowly. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite sadness. Not quite recognition. Something in between. That sounds right to me, he said quietly. I've met beings that gave up everything to become something beyond fighting. Beyond growing. He thought of Weiss. Of Beerus. Of the angels who existed outside consequence. There's something missing in them. Something that makes them. He searched for the word. Incomplete, Rush offered. Yeah. Goku nodded. Yeah, exactly. Eli had been quiet through this exchange, which for Eli meant he was thinking hard. So destiny summoned them to, what? Finish a 50-million-year-old argument. To provide the evidence, Rush said. The Animus faction never got to prove their theory was correct. Destiny has been carrying their research, their instruments, their methodology, waiting for the signatures they detected to come close enough to retrieve. He pulled up the holographic model, the golden figure, surrounded by corona light. They were right. Everything they theorized about what this energy could become, it's all here, in living form, walking the corridors of this ship. Goku looked at the holographic model of himself and tilted his head slightly, the way he always did when something surprised him but didn't threaten him. Huh, he said. So the ancients were trying to be more like us. In a sense, yes. He smiled, and it was the uncomplicated, genuine smile of someone who found the universe consistently more interesting than expected. That's really something. Rush's expression, normally maintained at careful neutrality, shifted towards something that might, in better lighting, with more generosity, be called wonder. There's more. The research program wasn't just theoretical. They built something, deep in Destiny's lower decks. He pulled up a schematic, corridors. They hadn't mapped. A chamber at the ship center, that the scans had returned strange results on for months. A device designed to interact with Animus energy directly, to amplify it, to study what happens when that energy is pushed beyond even its known limits. The bridge fell quiet. Goku's smile faded slightly. Not from fear. Fear wasn't really a register he operated in, but from something more like instinct. The sensation of a story arriving, at a point where the interesting part and the dangerous part become the same thing. Where's Vegeta? He asked. Eli pulled up the internal sensor map. Vegeta's energy signature, enormous, impossible to miss, burning like a second sun in Destiny's lower decks, was directly centered on the chamber in Rush schematic. He had been there for 2 hours. Oh no, Goku said, and was moving before the sentence finished. The deeper corridors of Destiny were different from the inhabited sections. Up above, where the crew lived and worked and argued and tried to survive, the ship had a quality of grudging hospitality, ancient and strange, but adapted to human presence over months of occupation. Worn slightly comfortable the way a stone path becomes smooth underfoot. Down here, in the sealed sectors below Deck 9, Destiny made no such concession. The corridors were narrower. The lighting was colder. A blue-white that cast no shadows because it seemed to come from everywhere. Simultaneously, the hum that ran through the ship's bones was deeper here, closer to the threshold of feeling than hearing. A vibration that settled in the chest and behind the eyes. Goku moved through it at speed. Not quite flying. The corridors were too narrow for full aerial movement, but covering ground with the effortless, ground-eating stride of someone for whom physical space is largely a suggestion. He was tracking Vegeta's Ki signature the way he always did. The way he'd done 10,000 times across as many battlefields, not with his eyes or his instruments but with something older and more direct. The instinctive Saiyans sensed that red power the way a compass reads north. Vegeta was close. And his energy was doing something Goku hadn't felt it do in a long time. It was building. Not the controlled escalation of a fighter powering up for combat. Something less disciplined than that. Something that in any other being Goku would have called excitement. But in Vegeta registered. More like the dangerous vibration of a pressurized system approaching. Its tolerance limits. The Saiyang prince was in the grip of something. And whatever it was, it had been working on him for hours. Goku rounded the final corridor and stopped. The chamber that Rush schematics had. Flagged as anomalous didn't look. Remarkable from the outside. A set of doors, open, their locking mechanisms dissolved by a precise Ki pulse. The metal around the frame slightly warped from the energy discharge. And beyond them, a room that made every other space on Destiny look modest. It was spherical, perhaps 30 meters across. The walls curving. Up and over into a ceiling that was also a floor was also a wall in the way that ancient geometry sometimes refused to respect. Conventional orientation. The surface was covered entirely in a lattice of crystalline conduits. Thousands of them, hair-thin, running in patterns too complex to follow. All of them currently alive with soft golden light. In the center of the sphere, suspended by nothing, was a platform of dark metal. And on the platform, cross-legged with his eyes closed and his arms resting on his knees, sat Vegeta. The golden light of the conduits was flowing toward him. Not all at once. In slow, rhythmic pulses, like a tide. Each pulse carried energy from the crystalline lattice to the figure at the center. And each pulse that arrived was absorbed, not passively, but actively. The way a fighter absorbs a technique they're studying. Taking it apart as it arrives. Understanding it, incorporating it. Vegeta's own Ki was responding, rising in answer to each pulse. The two energies finding a rhythm together that was deeply, fundamentally wrong in the way that two separate power sources, synchronizing unexpectedly is always wrong. Vegeta. Goku kept his voice even. What is this? Vegeta's eyes opened. They were their normal dark color, but the golden light of the conduits caught in them and made them look, for just a moment, like something that had been burning for a very long time. Kakarot. His voice was calm, preternaturally so. You should see what they built. I can see what they built. I need you to step off that platform. No. Vegeta. 50 million years. Vegeta rose smoothly to his feet, and the conduit light rose with him, drawn upward by his Ki like iron filings following a magnet. They built this 50 million years ago, for us. Do you understand what that means? Before humanity existed. Before your Earth formed. Before any of the civilizations that built these gates and these ships and these weapons, before all of it, there were beings who looked across the universe and found us, and decided that what we are was worth studying, worth preserving, worth waiting for. I know, Goku said. Rush told me. The Animus research. Rush told you the academic version. Vegeta stepped to the edge of the platform, and the air around him shimmered with a particular heat haze that preceded. Serious power output. I've been reading the actual research, not the theoretical framework. The data. What they measured. What they calculated our potential to be. His eyes fixed on Goku with an intensity that was familiar and also, right now, slightly alarming. They believe that Animus energy has no theoretical ceiling, Kakarot, no upper limit that physics imposes. The only limiting factor they could identify was the will of the being generating it. Goku was quiet for a moment. That's not news to us, Vegeta. No, but this is. Vegeta gestured at the chamber around him, the lattice, the conduits, the 50-million-year-old machine built by the universe's most advanced civilization to interact with Ki energy specifically. This device was built to remove inhibitors, psychological constraints, the unconscious limiters that every being places on their own power to avoid destroying themselves and everything around them. His voice dropped. They mapped ours, Kakarot. They mapped them precisely. Every Saiyang who ever existed has been operating at a fraction of their actual capacity. not because of physical limitation but because sanity requires it. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Goku looked at the device, at his oldest rival standing at its center, radiating energy that was already significantly beyond his normal baseline, his expression carrying the particular quality of a man who has been told something that rearranges his entire sense of what he is and found that he is not entirely opposed to the rearrangement. And you activated it, Goku said slowly. I interfaced with it. There's a difference. Vegeta, did you activate it? A pause that was answer enough. The crystalline lattice pulsed once, strongly, and every conduit in the chamber blazed to full luminosity simultaneously. Destiny shuddered, not the small, localized tremor of a contained system activating, but a full-body shudder that ran from bow to stern. 50 kilometers of ancient engineering, reacting to something happening in its deepest chamber with the galvanic response of a nervous system receiving unexpected input. The ship's alarms began, distant and urgent, from the inhabited decks above. Then Destiny's own defensive systems came online. Goku felt it before he saw it, the quality of the ship's ambient energy changing, tightening, focusing. The chamber doors behind him sealed with a sound like a bank vault closing. The conduit lattice shifted its pattern, the golden flow reversing direction, no longer feeding energy toward Vegeta but beginning to draw it back, pulling at his Ki with systematic, mechanical insistence. Not aggressive, not violent, clinical. The way a laboratory contains a reaction that has exceeded its experimental parameters. Vegeta's expression shifted from focused to furious in approximately half a second. It's a containment protocol, Goku realized. Activating the device without authorization, it triggered a lockdown. I know what it triggered. Vegeta's Ki surged against the drawing force of the lattice, the two energies wrestling in a way that made the air in the chamber taste like lightning. This ship is pulling at me, Kakarot, like it's trying to reclaim what I absorbed. Because you took something that wasn't calibrated for you yet. The device wasn't fully initialized. Rush said the research was unfinished. I don't need it to be finished. I need it to release me. If you fight it, you could damage the ship. We don't know what systems this chamber connects to. I don't particularly care about the ship. Vegeta. Goku's voice dropped, and the particular quality it took on, quiet, direct, carrying the weight of someone who has stood at the end of the world more than once and knows what it costs. Cut through the energy noise in the chamber with surgical precision. There are over 80 people on this vessel. Civilians, scientists, soldiers. They are 100 million light-years from home. This ship is the only thing keeping them alive. The chamber crackled. The lattice pulled. Vegeta pushed back. And the contest between Saiyang pride and ancient engineering was not, despite every instinct, entirely one-sided. The device had been built for this energy. It understood it in ways that gave it leverage. Vegeta's teeth were clenched. His eyes cut to Goku with an expression that was, beneath the fury, something more complicated. An acknowledgement that he recognized and resented, and was going to respond to anyway. Because whatever else Vegeta was, he was not the being he had once been, the one who would have let the ship burn. If I cooperate, he said, through clenched teeth, it is not because you asked. I know, Goku said. It is because I choose to. On my terms. I know, Vegeta. And when this containment releases, we'll figure out the device properly. With Rush. The right way. A pause that lasted exactly long enough to preserve dignity. Then Vegeta closed his eyes, drew a breath, and deliberately, methodically, began to lower his Ki output, not surrendering it, but pulling it back inside, reining the energy in with the iron discipline of a warrior who had spent decades learning that control and power are not opposites but partners. The lattice responded immediately, the drawing force easing as the energy differential decreased, the ancient system registering the de-escalation and beginning, gradually, to stand down. The chamber lights dimmed from blazing to ambient. Destiny stopped shuddering. In the quiet that followed, Goku let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. and Vegeta stood in the center of the platform with his eyes still closed and his expression carved from something harder than pride and older than anger. And the 50-million-year-old machine, built to understand them, hummed softly around them both. Then Destiny's collision alarm went off. Not the slow, procedural alert of a system flagging an anomaly. The hard, urgent, all-hands signal that meant something was coming, was already close, and was not friendly. Goku looked up at the sealed ceiling as if he could see through 50 meters of ancient metal to the space beyond. He could feel them. Dozens of energy signatures, cold and alien and utterly unlike anything in his experience, not malicious in the way of fighters, but hungry in the way of things that have been hungry for a very long time, converging on Destiny from multiple vectors. Their approach pattern, coordinated with a precision that suggested intelligence and practice. What is that? Vegeta's eyes were open, his containment situation entirely secondary now. His instincts locked onto the incoming signatures, with the absolute focus of a born warrior, scenting a battlefield. Goku reached out further with his senses, feeling the shape of the threat, its scale, its nature. His brow furrowed. There are a lot of them, he said. From above, Rush's voice came through the chamber's communication system, tight with controlled urgency. We have a Nakari fleet dropping out of FTL. 14 vessels. They detected the energy discharge from the lower decks. A pause that carried the specific weight of a man doing mathematics he doesn't like the result of. Our weapons are at 30%. Destiny cannot fight 14 Nakari warships at 30%, and we cannot run. They are already in weapons range. Vegeta's Ki flared back to full presence. The containment protocol now, entirely irrelevant in the face of something that actually mattered. He looked at Goku. Goku looked at him. 50 million years of ancient research, 80 lives, and a fleet of alien warships hung in the balance between them. And in the silent language of two beings who had been rivals and allies and rivals again, across more battles than either cared to count, an entire conversation passed in approximately 1 second. Don't tell me what to do out there, Vegeta said. Wouldn't dream of it, said Goku. Space, at the edge of a distant galaxy, does not care about the dramas of the beings who move through it. It does not care about ancient research programs or Saiyans, pride or the 80-odd humans aboard a 50-million-year-old vessel trying desperately to survive their own adventure. It does not care about fleets or weapons or the particular quality of courage it takes to stand between something enormous and the people behind you. Space simply is vast and cold and indifferent, the permanent backdrop against which every war ever fought has played out in complete cosmic silence. The Nakari fleet moved through it with the patient, coordinated menace of predators who have learned that patience is more reliable than speed. 14 vessels, not large by the standards of some of the conflicts Destiny's crew had survived, but large enough and configured with the specific tactical intelligence of a species that had been hunting this ship across star systems and had learned from every previous engagement. They came in a dispersed formation, no central flagship to target, no obvious command structure to decapitate, just 14 sources of coordinated weapons fire that could cover every angle of approach simultaneously, and had the energy reserves to sustain a prolonged engagement against a vessel running at reduced capacity. On Destiny's bridge, the atmosphere had the particular quality of professionals managing fear. Young stood at the tactical display with his hands flat on the console, reading the formation with a soldier's eye and finding nothing in it that he liked. Eli was running calculations on Destiny's weapons efficiency against 14 distributed targets, and the numbers he was producing had the specific quality of numbers that don't get better the more carefully you check them. Camille Ray had appeared from somewhere and was standing near the door with the expression of someone who has accepted that the situation is beyond their expertise and is simply waiting to see what expertise looks like when applied. Rush was watching his screen with fierce, focused attention, not the tactical display, but the sensor readout from Destiny's lower decks were 2 energy signatures that dwarfed everything else on the board were moving upward through the ship at significant speed. "They're heading for the hull," Rush said. Young looked up. "What?" "The Saiyans. They're not coming to the bridge. They're heading directly for the exterior hull." Rush pulled the sensor feed onto the main screen. 2 points of light, Goku's warm, solar quality and Vegeta sharper. More compressed burn, moving through Destiny's internal corridors like twin stars navigating a maze. "They're going outside." The bridge was quiet for a moment. "Outside," Young said. "Into space. They don't appear to require life support in the conventional sense. Their energy output suggests they can sustain themselves in vacuum, at least temporarily." Rush looked up. "I think they're going to engage the fleet directly." Young looked at the tactical display. 14 Nakari warships. Then at the sensor feed. 2 energy signatures that his instruments still couldn't fully quantify. Moving with absolute certainty toward the exterior hull. "God help us," Ray said quietly. "Different gods here," Eli said, almost to himself. Possibly literally. The hull of Destiny was cold and ancient and utterly silent. Goku stood on it with his boots magnetized to nothing. There was no magnetism. No grip, no physical connection between him and the 50-million-year-old metal beneath his feet, except the simple decision to be there. Ki extended through his body in the particular configuration that allowed him to exist comfortably in environments that should have been lethal. The stars around him were unfamiliar. Every constellation wrong. The galaxy spread below him in shapes he'd never seen. And the distant smear of light. That was Destiny's destination, whatever the ancients had sent her to find at the end of her journey, was visible as a faint, directional glow. He'd fought in stranger places. Vegeta appeared beside him a moment later, stepping through Destiny's hull access port with the air of someone exiting a building they found mildly inadequate. He looked at the Nakari fleet, 14 vessels arranged in their careful, predatory formation, already beginning their attack. Approach, and his expression did the thing it always did when confronted with a significant threat. It didn't show fear. It showed calculation, and beneath the calculation, the particular quality of anticipation that Vegeta had never quite managed to entirely suppress. Regardless of how composed he tried to appear, he was looking forward to this. Goku couldn't entirely blame him. After hours of confinement and containment protocols and conversations about ancient philosophy, the clean simplicity of a threat that could be answered with force had its own appeal. 14, Vegeta said. Yeah. You take the left flank. 7 vessels. You don't get to assign me targets, Vegeta. I'm not assigning. I'm suggesting. There's a difference. A pause. Take the left flank. Goku smiled. Sure. They rose from Destiny's hull simultaneously, 2 points of light ascending into the dark, and the Nakari fleet's targeting systems registered them approximately 2 seconds before their weapons could meaningfully respond, which was approximately 1.5 seconds too late. The crew of Destiny watched it on the external sensors. They had fought the Nakari before. They knew what Nakari weapons fire looked like, what their shields could absorb, how their attack patterns developed over the course of an engagement. They had data. They had experience. They had the specific, hard-won knowledge of people who had survived encounters they probably shouldn't have. None of it prepared them for what the external sensors showed. Eli had put the feed on the main screen, and the bridge had gone completely silent. Not the charged silence of people managing fear, but the simple, struck silence of people watching something that their existing categories of understanding cannot adequately contain. The left flank of the Nakari formation, 7 vessels, each one capable of sustaining significant weapons fire, came apart in 40 seconds. Not destroyed all at once. Not by a single overwhelming weapon. By something moving between them at speeds the sensors tracked as a series of displaced energy readings and impact events. too fast for the visual feed to follow coherently. The sensor data told the story that the visuals couldn't. A Saiyan Ki signature moving at velocities that made the Nakari targeting systems. Register ghost contacts, false positives. Weapon solutions that dissolved before they could fire. Each impact registered as a focused energy discharge against. Nakari hull plating, not random, not brutal, but precise. Targeting the same structural points on each vessel with the consistency of someone who had reverse engineered the engineering. In real time during the approach, Goku had spent 30 seconds studying the first vessel's hull configuration. He spent the next 10 applying what he'd learned to all 7. On the right flank, Vegeta's approach was different. He didn't move between the vessels. He stopped in front of them. The first Nakari warship to achieve a weapons lock on him fired. Everything it had, a concentrated barrage of directed energy that the sensor array measured as significant even by Destiny's combat standards. Vegeta stood in it. Let it wash over him. His Ki flared in response, not defensively, not to deflect, but simply because the energy involved was interesting, and his body's automatic response to energy input was to absorb it, process it, add it to the existing total in the way of a being whose entire evolutionary history is a sequence of getting hit by things and becoming stronger for it. The barrage lasted 4 seconds. Then Vegeta raised one hand. The final flash that left it was not full power. It was perhaps 30% of what Vegeta could generate in earnest, calibrated, deliberately, to destroy the vessel in front of him without the overspill damaging the ships beyond it, which was, Eli noted later, with the reverence of someone describing a mathematical proof of unusual elegance. Not restraint but precision. The difference between a warrior and a weapon was exactly that quality of calibration. And watching Vegeta exercise it against a Nakari warship was watching a being who had spent a lifetime learning the difference demonstrate complete mastery of it. 3 vessels, 3 final flashes, each one precisely measured. The remaining 4 vessels on the right flank broke formation. Nakari did not break formation. Their tactical programming, their hive-coordinated behavior, their 50-year history of hunting, destiny across star systems, none of it included a subroutine for break formation and flee, because they had never encountered a threat that made that the rational response. They broke formation. Vegeta watched them go with an expression that suggested he found their retreat both understandable and mildly disappointing. Then, Kakarot. Yeah. Your 4 are regrouping with my 4. Goku looked. 8 remaining Nakari vessels, the survivors of both flanks, were consolidating into a single formation, drawing together in the particular configuration of a force that has abandoned tactical sophistication in favor of overwhelming concentration of fire. Everything they had focused on a single point, on the 2 figures floating in the dark between them and destiny. They're going to fire everything, Goku said. Yes. At both of us. Simultaneously. Yes. A pause. You want to do the fusion, Goku said. The silence that followed had layers. The outermost layer was the simple silence of space. Beneath that was the silence of 2 Saiyans who had been rivals for so long that their rivalry had become the bedrock of their relationship. Beneath that was the silence of a prince who did not yield, did not subordinate, did not combine, for whom the fusion represented not a tactical option but a fundamental statement about the relationship between his identity and someone else's. I want to win, Vegeta said finally. The methodology is secondary. Vegeta, that's the most you've ever said yes without saying yes. Shut up, Kakarot. The Nakari fleet fired. The energy that came from 8 vessels simultaneously was, by Destiny's sensor measurements, enough to critically damage the ship through her shields at full capacity, concentrated into a single point in space. It was a wall of directed destruction that moved at a significant fraction of light speed, and left the sensor array briefly unable to distinguish individual readings. Within the cone of fire, it struck 2 figures who were no longer 2 figures. The fusion dance, performed in the fractional seconds between the weapons lock and the discharge, was not something the external sensors could follow. It registered as an energy spike, both signatures simultaneously surging, merging, the combined output briefly exceeding the sensor array's measurement ceiling, and then a single signature where two had been, burning with an intensity that made Destiny's hull sensors register thermal input from several kilometers away. Vegeta stood in the fire and let it break against him. Then he moved. What followed lasted 11 seconds by Destiny's internal chronometer. The sensor logs would be studied for months afterward, by Rush, by Eli, by every SGC analyst who was eventually cleared for the classified debrief. And the consensus would be that the 11 seconds of footage represented the single most significant combat data ever collected by human instruments, not because of the scale of destruction, though the destruction was significant, but because of what the data revealed about the nature of the energy involved, the way it interacted with space itself, bending light slightly around the point of maximum output, generating gravitational readings that shouldn't be possible for a non-stellar mass, operating at the intersection of physics and something that the ancient database would later cross-reference with the Animus. Research under the notation. Observed capacity confirms theoretical model. Upper limit. Unresolved. 8 Nakari vessels. 11 seconds. The sensor logs showed no debris field of significance. The energy dispersal had been, like Vegeta's final flashes, precise, controlled, the minimum necessary, applied with the maximum efficiency. When the fusion's natural time limit released, Goku and Vegeta reappeared as separate signatures, floating in the now empty space where a fleet had been, in the specific silence of a battlefield that has been thoroughly resolved. Destiny drifted beneath them, undamaged, her crew alive. The stars didn't witness it. Stars don't witness anything. But Destiny recorded it, in her sensor logs, her research databases, her 50-million-year-old memory, the moment too. Saiyans hung in the void of an unknown galaxy and let the silence of a resolved battle settle around them like something earned. Rush spent 3 days afterward in the Animus chamber, reading. The ancient researchers had been right about everything they theorized, and the knowledge sat in him with the particular weight of understanding that arrives too late to be shared with the people who needed it most. The faction that built Project Animus had died arguing with their own civilization about which path was superior. The answer had floated through space for 50 million years, waiting to be collected, and now Rush had it. And the people who needed to hear it had been gone longer than humanity had existed. He wrote it into Destiny's primary database anyway, for whoever came next. Goku spent a week helping Eli catalog the Animus research, sitting cross-legged on the bridge floor eating everything the ship's food synthesizers could produce and asking questions about the ancients with the genuine, tireless curiosity of someone who finds the universe consistently more interesting than expected. He was, Eli noted in his private log, the most purely good person he had ever met, not naive, not simple, but fundamentally oriented toward life in a way that made the people around him feel that orientation as something almost physical. Vegeta returned to the Animus chamber alone, daily. He didn't activate the device again. He sat in front of it and read the research data on his own terms, at his own pace, and told no one what conclusions he reached. But the quality of his silence changed, became less like an argument waiting to happen and more like something being digested, integrated, becoming part of an understanding that would take years to fully articulate, if it ever was. Destiny sailed on, deeper into the unknown. She had been waiting 50 million years for proof that the path her builders abandoned was real and valid and magnificent in ways that transcended their theoretical models. She had her proof now. Whether the Saiyans would find a way home or forge a new purpose in this galaxy of stargates and ancient mysteries, only time would determine. But in the research logs of a civilization that had reached for transcendence and missed the most important part of it, 2 names would be added to the data, not as specimens, not as subjects, but as answers. The universe, vast and indifferent as it was, had occasionally, against all probability, managed to be exactly right.